ourselves with others, and also being very willing and eager to just hear other people speak from their heart, and having an openness to receive them. Gülen himself, many of his sermons, which have been written down and compiled into books, speak about this very clearly. So much of his work is designed to instruct those inside the Muslim faith, those who are practicing the Muslim faith, in the traditions of the faith. It's not a watered-down version of Islam. It is a traditional form of Islam, and it is an observant form of Islam. I would even say it's a conservative form of Islam. Conservative meaning to conserve, to save the traditions. Not to throw them away and develop new ones, but to save the traditions and preserve them and then interpret them for a new time. So he himself, in his work, and the community of people inspired by him, very much themselves, but with others. Eager to be with others. Eager to fellowship with others and be friends and eat together and drink tea by the gallon with each other. Now, what makes them able to do this? Because the point is not to argue the maxims of theology. The point is not to even debate those things. The point is to just share from our hearts. Share from our experience of God. Share where we are struggling in our spiritual life and where we need support. And just share. Share what our journey has been. Share what matters most to us. And just listen. So this is something very powerful. And it's something that I think is very much current in terms of what we need here in the 21st century, where we are a global society, connected perhaps more than we've ever been because of mass communications and technology and travel. But he's writing in the 13th century. 700-something years ago. So it's a powerful piece of the context. These two things, 13th century Konya, and then being located in the spiritual or mystical tradition. These are very important pieces of the context. So any of us who would want to appropriate his work or use it as an inspiration, I think we have to keep those things in mind. The third little piece here is a context of his work. And that is the context of human relationship. Rumi became a poet because of a relationship that he had. Not with God. I mean, that was part of it. But it was with a man. Shams. His relationship, his amazing, extraordinary friendship with Shams of Tabriz was the context for which he wrote all of his poetry. He did not write one word of poetry until he met Shams. And the story is well known. He was in the city, he was riding on a horse. Shams is a wandering teacher, holy man, Sufi. Shams asked him a couple of questions. They interchanged each other in a series of questions. And the answers that Shams gave him had Rumi fall off his horse onto the ground. And they had this very powerful friendship. Very powerful. At times they locked themselves in a room together, meditating and studying and praying and reading and discussing and sharing, to the point that people thought Rumi had gone mad, that he'd gone a little batty, because it was extraordinary, this relationship. Now, this is important. And after Shams disappeared, mostly we think he was killed. People were jealous that Rumi, this learned scholar and teacher, had been taken away, in their experience, he'd been taken away. This friendship had come in and consumed him, and their beloved teacher was now off doing a very different thing that he'd been doing up to that point in his life. Suddenly, all he's doing is writing poetry. He's not being the jurist that he was and the scholar. He's being a poet now, and he's off with Shams, and it's this incredible thing. And so the consensus is that Shams was probably killed. After that, you see this whole body of poems of absolute grief and longing. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's not just longing for God. It is longing for God. But it's longing for shams. It's longing for that other human being. And when Shams leaves, of course, famously, the brotherhood of the dervishes, he begins that community of the brothers. And they live in community together. And you can see some of their dwelling places there in Konya that have been restored and preserved. And they're living there together in community as brothers, supporting each other, urging each other onward, challenging each other, spurring each other onward in their growth. The entire context for his poetry is the context of human relationship. The first day when Rumi met Shams, he came home and he said, I met God today in the form of a human being. In the form of a human being. Shams himself said, if we were to go on the pilgrimage to Mecca and go around the Kaaba, if we were to lift up the Kaaba, we would see that all we are doing is worshiping each other. That's really what we're doing. Worshiping the divine, reflected in each other. Now, I'm not saying this. Shams said that. Rumi says this. And this is not to deny or to undermine their belief in the one God. Far from it. It's to show that the belief in the one God is real right here in our friendship, in our relationship, and that it is all too easy to go to the mosque or go to the Mecca and pray to the sky and to treat our fellow neighbor like dogs and to do violence to them in our speaking and in our thinking. That really worship of God and love for the beloved is in human relationship. And that's really where it counts. That is a key feature of Rumi's work. And it's where the hardest work is to be done. Now, anyone who has spent even 5 minutes with Rumi's poetry knows, and this will be my final thought, knows that his poetry is about love. It's love poetry. When Rumi speaks about love, it includes the emotions that we can feel. And we all know what those feelings are. We know what those loving feelings are. And they're wonderful. Who doesn't love them? Who doesn't really enjoy them? But love, the way Rumi speaks of it, and indeed the way all spiritual people speak of it, is not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's a commitment. It's a commitment to love. Not to feel good about people, not to be happy all the time with people. It's a commitment to behave in a certain way toward them, to respect them even when they are doing stupid things, to tolerate them even when they're not being very tolerant, to respect them as human beings when they are being disrespectful, to respect their humanity, even when they themselves are living in such a way that it looks like they are living less than human lives and they're living more like animal lives, but to respect them. So here, love means not so much having a feeling toward people, although sometimes the feeling is nice. It's having a commitment to behave in a certain way toward people. That will transform the world. That is the love of the beloved that will transform the world. And the only people who can do that are those who have expanded themselves. One of the most famous quotes from Rumi is, "Be as tolerant as the ocean. Expand your heart to be as wide and limitless as the ocean so that you can really embrace your arms and put your arms around everyone."